If the grid were to go down and you've got a gas generator or a solar generator connected to solar panels, how many devices and appliances can you power and for how long? With an aging power grid and warnings from power companies becoming more routine that power outages may occur, knowing this information in advance will really help you to determine how to prepare should you lose power. In this video, I'm going to help you understand all of this by explaining everything in simple terms. I'll show you some practical examples, and then I'll go over a newly revised calculator that I built for you, the community. So here's what I'm going to do in this video. Instead of bombarding you with a bunch of technical terms, we're going to keep it simple. This is going to be what I would consider a video that builds on itself. We're going to start off with simple concepts, and then in each section we're going to build on top of those concepts as we go. And I promise you I'll intentionally go slow, and I would encourage you to stick around until the end, as we're going to take everything we've learned and then apply it using a custom calculator that I created. If you have to watch a video a few times, it's going to be worth it, as you'll have a very firm understanding of everything you need to know. And by the end, you'll understand how to power that refrigerator or other device if the power were to go out. We'll also cover a low-price tool that you can pick up at your local hardware store, even check out at your local library to help you clearly see how much power each device in your house uses. So here's a breakdown of what we're going to cover in this video. I'm going to start off by defining a few basic concepts we'll use throughout the video. This will really serve as a foundation, a guide, if you will, as we move along. Next, we're going to take a look at various options on the market for powering devices, specifically solar generators combined with solar panels and also gas generators. Then we'll take what we learned with these concepts and we'll look at items we're going to want to power if the grid were to go down and there's no power. We'll learn how much power they realistically need. And finally, I'll show you a new free calculator we just created that shows you how long you can power devices with something like a solar generator. Again, don't worry if you feel like you might get overwhelmed. I'll keep this as basic as possible so you can easily follow along and make educated decisions regarding the right setup for you. We're going to start off the video by going over a simple word. And don't worry, we're going to focus on the simple word, and then we'll show examples of how this is used, which is where I believe you'll quickly begin to connect the dots. Now, don't feel overwhelmed in this segment, as I'll show practical examples in just a moment to illustrate what I'm about to explain. Now, there's one unit that we're going to discuss at this point that will serve as a foundation throughout this video, and it's a word that you're going to see on electronics if you pay attention. It's the word watt. Okay, I said a technical word. Again, the word is watt. It's just a unit of power that we'll use in this video to help guide us in determining what we'll need to know if the power were to go out. Let's progress further with the word kilowatt. There are two parts of this word, kilo and watt. Kilo simply means 1,000. So a kilowatt is, as you guessed, 1,000 watts. Okay, so we've covered watts and kilowatts. And there's one last phrase I'm going to throw at you that we'll use in this video that you'll see on your electricity bill, kilowatt hour. So we have three parts here. We have kilo, watt, and then hour. A kilowatt hour equals the amount of energy you would use by keeping a 1,000 watt appliance running for 1 hour. See what we did there? Kilo is 1,000, then we have watt, and then we have hour. Or if you were powering two appliances together that use 500 watts each, they would combine to consume 1 kilowatt. And if you use them for 1 hour, then you'd be using, you guessed it, 1 kilowatt hour. Are you still tracking with me here? So now what can we do with these newly discovered words, watt and kilowatt hour? Let's start tying this all together in a real way that helps us in our journey of understanding powering critical electrical devices if the grid were to go down. In front of me, I have a 1,000 watt electric hot plate. I selected this for example because it uses 1,000 watts or 1 kilowatt when plugged in. Now, if we use this for 1 hour, guess how much energy it would use? As we discussed, it would be 1 kilowatt hour. If we were not to power anything else in the house that day, but this just one device, we would be charged for our 1 kilowatt hour on our electricity bill. So let's say we use two of these for 1 hour. Then we'd be billed for 2 kilowatt hours. It's really that simple, honestly. But let's say we just use this hot plate for only 15 minutes. So how many kilowatts did I use in? Well, 15 minutes is 1/4 of an hour. So that would be 0.25 kilowatt hours that we use. Let's look at one last example, a simple light bulb. This uses only 9 watts. It's printed right here on the side, 9 watts. Remember, by comparison, our hot plate over here uses 1,000 watts. So in 1 hour, how many kilowatt hours will this light bulb use? Well, to get this value, all we have to do is divide 9 by 1,000, 1,000 watts in this case, and we would get 0.009. So we'd only use 0.009 kilowatt hours, which is not that much. Where I live, 1 kilowatt hour costs about 22 cents. So to power this light bulb for each hour, it would cost me about 0.00198, or let's just round it up to 0.002, which is 1/5 of a penny. So if I ran this light bulb for about 5 hours, that would cost me roughly 1 penny. Now, if you got this far, congrats, you've learned the basics and you can do a lot with the information that we just laid out. Now, up to this point, we're just playing around with numbers to determine how much energy we use and how we determine those values. So now that we have this information, the rest of this video is about determining what we would want to power and how to power it. Let's jump to the next point about how to power these devices. But remember to stick around until the end as we're going to tie this all together. How to power. When discussing how we'll provide power to critical devices such as a refrigerator or other items if the grid were to go down, we're going to take a look at a few options that are the most popular, namely solar and gas generators. I did do a separate DIY video that shows you how to build your own solar generator setup, which I'll link to in the cards in the description section below if you want to check that out. Let's start with solar generators, and then I'll briefly run through gas generators. A solar generator is a name given to these devices you can purchase that allows you to plug them into solar panels or a standard home wall socket that allows you to charge them. They have an interface on the front that allows you to plug in your standard appliances and devices that you want to operate, such as a light or a refrigerator, maybe a saw or electric welder. Now, these systems have a battery that stores the energy we harvest from the sun with our solar panels. And I'm going to quickly run through an explanation of solar generators here for you and gas generators afterwards. Now, much of what we're learning about solar generators applies to gas generators. Capacity for solar generators. Capacity simply refers to the amount of charge that a device like this can store. Think about filling your car's gas tank with gas. It has the ability to, say, hold 15 to 20 gallons. That is a vehicle's fuel storage capacity. These solar generators have a unit you'll see on the specs regarding capacity. It's normally listed as kilowatt hours or kWh. Earlier we covered watt hours in great detail. Now, for example, this Jackery 2000 Pro can hold 2,160 watt hours or 2.1 kilowatt hours of capacity. Remember earlier we spoke about the induction cooking plate. It pulls 1,000 watts when you plug it in. So in 1 hour, it would pull 1,000 watts from this Jackery, or 1 kilowatt hours. So the Jackery could power this for about 2 hours. Now, there's a few technical details that we'll cover in a moment that impact this number, but if you get this concept, you're doing fine. Continuous and surge output. These two values tell us how much this device can output. If you were to power devices with this solar generator, it can output 2,000 watts at once. Now, I don't recommend you plug in devices that combine pull 2,000 watts for an extended period of time, as you're running this at 100% output capability, which will damage the battery in time if you were to do this over and over and over. If you were to run your car all day at the maximum RPM, you'd burn out your motor pretty quickly. And the same principle applies to these devices, and you ideally want to run them at about 50% of what the manufacturer lists for the continuous output. From time to time, it's fine running them at 100%, but if I were to size my solar generator based on what I want to consistently power, I would look for one that could output double what I expect to use on a regular basis. Let's plug in this hot plate and see what happens. As you can see, the front of the screen shows we're providing roughly 1,000 watts to this induction heat plate. So again, if this heat plate were to be left on, we would anticipate that the Jackery could power for about 2 hours. The Jackery has a battery capacity of 2 kilowatt hours. Again, it's not going to come out to 2 hours of output to power our induction heating plate due to efficiency issues, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, quick note about surge. Some devices, when you start them up, they draw a lot of power. Things like fans, refrigerators, or saws, which have a motor. When you start these devices up, you're going to see a momentary spike to get the motor moving, and then it's going to settle down to the continuous watt usage we discussed in the previous point. Now, why is this important to understand this surge value? This Jackery has a surge capacity of 4,000 watts. And if you were to plug in a device that has a higher surge than 4,000 watts, then it's going to cause this Jackery to trip a circuit internally, which you can reset later, as the device would exceed the maximum surge output capability. Solar input capability. This is a very important number to consider when shopping for these devices. It gives you an understanding of how quickly you can charge this with solar panels. Now, this unit states that it can handle 1,200 watts of solar input. Now, just a quick word about solar panels. Typically, you're going to get about 85% of what they say they will, meaning if a solar panel says it's a 100-watt panel, on average, you can expect about 85 watts instead of the full 100. That's not always the case, but that's more of an average. So if I were to plug in, let's say 1,200 watts of panels to this, I would expect to get a little over 1,000 watts coming into this device. Now, it's not always this precise, and factors like clouds, whether or not the panels are pointed directly at the sun, temperature, and many other factors, they come into play, but it's a pretty good indicator of what you can expect when charging these with solar panels. Now, one other note. If the panels are pointed directly at the sun, you're going to get maximum production. For example, if the sun were directly overhead and the panels were at an angle to the sun, they wouldn't produce nearly as much as when you point them directly at the sun. Now also, the sun moves from east to west, so as long as you go out and adjust the direction of the panels to follow the sun, you're going to get more production. I did a video a while back that shows you how to build your own stand to move solar panels to essentially follow the sun. And also, if you've got this solar generator plugged into solar panels, you can both charge the solar generator while providing power to the appliance if you've got appliances plugged in at the same time. Again, I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but at the end of the video, we're going to tie this all together, I promise. So let's move on. ICE generators. A quick word about internal combustion engines, or ICE generators, as a backup power source. I have a few on standby in case there's no sun. I live in Southern California, so I have sun nearly year-round, but in January, for example, I have very little. So having a traditional ICE generator as part of your backup plan, I think, is a good idea. Let me explain how it worked in our setup to give you the most options. In the previous discussion, we spoke about 3 values in detail. We went over capacity, continuous, and surge output. Now, ICE generators have some similar values that we can compare. Let's look at this Champion 3500 watt generator that I have sitting in my garage. Let's run through the same numbers as we did with the solar generator. I won't explain the meaning behind each, but rather we'll look quickly at each of the values we'll see on these devices. Surge watts comes in at 4,375 watts. Running watts is 3,500 watts. And then it has a gas capacity of 4.7 gallons. Now the runtime at 50% load is 14 hours. So let's start with the last value of runtime, which is important. It says that if you've got 4.7 gallons of gas, it can run for 14 hours if it's on a 50% load. So on their website, they're telling us that if we put 1,700 watts, which is 50% of what it runs continuously, it can run for 14 hours. Now remember earlier, we used the example of the hot plate pulling 1,000 watts. If we were to use a hot plate with my particular gas generator, that would mean you would still have another 700 watts of load to hit that 50% mark. Also, it can handle up to 4,375 watts of surge. If you're powering a device which has an initial large draw, such as a big fan or a motor, that's the max surge for this generator. Now for traditional generators, you can run them continuously at about 80 to 90% of their running watts. They're designed to handle this heavy of a load. And for this particular generator, it's rated for 3,500 running watts. So if I were to multiply 3,500 times 0.9, we'd get 3,150. So this particular generator I have, it could continuously output 3,150 watts until the fuel runs out. Now earlier, I mentioned that the manufacturer states that it could run for 14 hours at 50% load. So if we're running at 90% load, guess what? We're definitely not going to get 14 hours of run time based on that fuel that I have. The heavier the load, the more fuel it's going to use. Honestly, the best setup for backup power is a solar generator with solar panels plus a traditional internal combustion generator. Since this particular EcoFlow can handle as much as 1,800 watts of AC charging, a traditional gas generator that can output as much as 2,000 watts continuously would power this battery just fine. Now, where did I get 2,000 watts for the gas generator? Well, if we multiply 2,000 by 0.9, which is again 90%, we talked about this a second ago with gas generators, they can run at 90% comfortably, we get 1,800. So if you go this route of having both options, both a gas and solar generator, get a gas generator that has a running wattage of slightly more than the maximum AC charging capability of the solar generator. I think running a gas generator in short bursts to charge up your batteries is really the best approach if you're not able to harvest enough power from solar panels. Now, additionally, it makes conserving fuel on your traditional gas generator so much easier, as you can run it long enough to charge the batteries on the power station and then turn it off versus having to run your gas generator for hours on end to power devices and appliances. But remember, running a gas generator produces noises and fumes which others are going to notice, which is why I prefer to go with more solar panels, so I hopefully don't have to bring out the gas generator. Now, I did do a video last year on creating a generator quiet box if you want to check that out. Now, one final note on this EcoFlow solar generator I've got here in front of me. I've tested many solar generators over the years, and at the time of recording this video, my favorite is definitely the EcoFlow units. Why? Well, there's several reasons, but one of the things that EcoFlow has that is really unique is the ability to change how much AC input it will accept. So for example, this unit can handle up to 1,800 watts of AC input when charging, but through the app, I can change that amount and drop it down to a lower value. So why does that matter? Well, if you have a traditional gas generator that can only output 1,000 watts continuously, I can actually throttle the EcoFlow back through their app and have it only accept something like 900 watts. Otherwise, if the solar generator you have pulls 1,800 watts continuously and you can't throttle that value back and your gas generator can only output 1,000 watts, it would trip out the gas generator. If you're interested in checking out any of the EcoFlow products, they are running a sale this month, and I've got coupon codes which I'll post below. What to power? Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We've discussed watts, we've discussed kilowatts and kilowatt hours. We've then pivoted to discuss how these units are shown on the specs for solar and gas generators and what they mean. You now should have a pretty firm understanding, I hope. And if you're still not clear, I would encourage you to go back and rewatch the video from the beginning, because now we're going to take that information and begin to apply it to determine what devices we can power and for how long. This is always a question that comes up when people are trying to determine what generator, gas or solar, is best for them. The number one question I often get is, how long will this power my refrigerator? In this segment, I'm going to focus on the discussion of solar generators. I think it's easier to answer that question with gas generators, as the manufacturer will state how long the engine will run based on how much gas is in the tank. But with solar generators, it's a little more difficult to answer that question. In the past, I told people to go to the manufacturer's website to get information on how much energy a refrigerator will use on an annual basis. There are so many factors that determine this value, and it's really hard to get a perfect answer. I did use that exact approach for my refrigerator, and they estimated that it was going to consume about 1.5 kilowatt hours per day. But I have a device installed in my house that tracks my power consumption on each power line. And I have a line dedicated to my refrigerator, and that app showed that on the average day, I consume about 0.9 kilowatt hours to power my refrigerator. So 0.9 kilowatt hours equals 900 watts. In order to determine how much energy we need each hour, simply divide 900, the watts this refrigerator uses in 24 hours, by 24, the number of hours in a day, and we get 37.5. So my refrigerator uses about 38 watts each hour. And we can do a lot with this information in just a moment, which we'll show in a calculator that I've built for you. Now, one note about my refrigerator, it's running in a very comfortable 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit degree climate. If the grid were to go down and you live somewhere hot, well, your house will heat up and the refrigerator will have to work harder. So how do we get an accurate reading of how much our devices will actually need in a real scenario? To answer that question, let's look at a secret weapon that I mentioned earlier to help you determine the usage each day of your devices, and this is called a kilowatt meter. Now you can pick these up at Home Depot or on Amazon for about 20 bucks. Some local libraries even allow you to check these out, and I'll post a link to it below in the description section if you want to pick one of these up. You can plug this device into a wall socket and then plug in the device that you need to power, and this will allow you to monitor how much power that device is using. It's going to allow you to track the energy that flows through it essentially. What I would advise you to do is hook this up to your refrigerator, plug it into the wall, and then plug your refrigerator into this, and then come back in 24 hours. It's going to record how much power went through this meter to show you exactly how much the appliance you're powering uses in a 24-hour cycle. Now, of course, you can apply this to any appliance or device that you want to monitor. You can even see in real time how much a device is pulling when you plug it into this measuring device. This gives us so much useful information that we can use, tying it all together. Okay, so the moment has arrived. We've learned a lot up to this point in the video, so let's tie it all together so you can answer the question of how much energy you'll need and what device can power your refrigerator or other appliances. Now, a quick note about solar panels. If you have solar panels, you can power appliances indefinitely as long as you produce more power than you consume, but we'll talk about that more in a moment. So let's look at a calculator I built for you. We'll go over to my desktop and I'll walk you through this. So what we're doing is we're looking at a calculator that we recently updated that we've had on the channel before. We've added a new column that shows time of use because our calculator in the past, it didn't have this column and it created a lot of confusion for people. So let's run through a few real use cases here. Say my example earlier of the refrigerator. I've got my refrigerator that we determined pulls 37.4 watts each hour. Now, if I were to come over here and say I've got just one of them, which I do, and I want to run it for 24 hours. And by the way, you can choose your time from this drop down starting as low as 1 minute up to 24 hours. So we're going to select 24 hours because I need to run mine for, in a given day, 24 hours. So if I were to come over here and begin to look at each one of these columns and we scroll down, we're going to see how much this device has left after running this refrigerator for 24 hours. So in this case, Anchor 767, after running this all day, powering my refrigerator, I would have 966 watts left. Now this particular device it has a capacity right here of 2,000. So we essentially, if you look at it, used about half of it. Now I've been talking about EcoFlow, and by the way, the device I've had on my desktop, I need to add that to this spreadsheet. But let's look at one of their models. Let's look at their Delta Pro, which is a very popular model. If you look here, it has a capacity of 3,600 watts. So if I were to run my refrigerator for one day, at the end, I would still have a lot left over. All right, so we got a refrigerator taken care of. Say we need to charge or power our laptop. Again, let's just say for an hour. And then let's say, again, we used this example of the hot plate a minute ago. Say we want to run one hot plate, I don't know, in a given day, maybe about 30 minutes. That should be enough to boil some water a couple of times a day. So again, let's scroll down. We're looking at the EcoFlow Delta Pro. We'll scroll down and we see that we still have almost half the battery left. You see where I'm going with this? You can begin to say, well, okay, I need to use this device for, I don't know, whatever, for an hour in a given day, or I need to use it for 24 hours. And so what this allows you to do is to begin to calculate if your power went out for a whole day, for full 24 hours, which of these devices are going to be able to power for how long. So if we begin to scroll around, and again, there's a lot in here. I've got a lot of different devices. Some you're going to overshoot. So for example, when you begin to see the negative right here, this is the EcoFlow Delta Mini. If I were to run the refrigerator all day, if I were to run a hot plate for, how long did we say? Here we go. Hot plate, if we ran that for 30 minutes and we ran our laptop for a full hour, I would begin to overshoot it. So what we did is we set this up so you can customize it. Now again, everybody's gonna have different needs. So what I would encourage you to do is come in here and you can make a copy of this spreadsheet. All you have to do is just simply come over to File, make a copy, and then copy it over to your particular Google Drive. You're not gonna be able to edit this online. You have to make a copy. And if you have a YouTube or Gmail account, then you're gonna be able to make a copy of this. So if there's particular devices you wanna get in and start editing these values, it will allow you to do so in the spreadsheet. And again, this will quickly help you to determine which of these devices are gonna power what you need and for how long. Hopefully this tool helps you understand how much power you'll need to power various devices, and it's gonna help you to determine which solar generator is best for you. Solar panels. Well, how many do I need? Well, it depends on how much power you're pulling from a solar generator. Let's use a refrigerator example again. I know I'm gonna get emails asking, what's the best option to go with to power a basic refrigerator? How many solar panels will I need? So let's run through some basic numbers. A typical solar panel is about 85% efficient. So a 100-watt panel will produce about 85 watts if you're directing it at the sun. Now, solar generator's output is on average about 80% efficient. Each solar generator's actual efficiency is included in the calculator on the spreadsheet. So then we have to begin to look at the variables that ultimately determine how much your solar panel will output. Do you get a lot of clear sunny days in your area? Can you move your solar panels to always track with the sun? How many hours a day does the sun shine in your area? What's the temperature on average? We could go on, but let me give you a few general rules of thumb. These aren't precise, they're just generalities. For every 100 watts of solar panels you have, you can expect on average between 300 watt hours to 500 watt hours of power. In other words, you'll get roughly 3 to 5 times their wattage in a typical day. In my area in the summer, I can get about 550 watt hours per 100 watt of panel. So I'm closer to a factor of 5.5 times. But again, my location is prime for solar where I live. So recap this with some actual numbers. Most of these solar generators can handle in the ballpark of 1,000 watts coming in from solar panels. If you have 1,000 watts of solar panels set up under ideal situations on average, you get between 3,000 watt hours or 5,000 watt hours in a day if the sun is shining. But I'm not accounting for cloudy or rainy days or short days. I've given you the best case possible. So to answer the question, what would I need to power the refrigerator if the grid were to go down? Well, I wouldn't think of it as finding the minimum setup per se, because you're very likely gonna wanna power other devices or appliances. If I just got down to brass tacks here, I think something between a 1 kilowatt hour battery capacity, an inverter that could output 1,000 to 2,000 watts and can handle, let's say, 500 watts of solar, you'd be set for powering a basic refrigerator. Now, looking at my spreadsheet, you're gonna see plenty of options that can do this. Some of you may have more power demands, and so after playing around with the calculator, you're gonna know which unit is best for you. Now, after watching this video, I would recommend you follow up by watching my video on the best solar generator for 2023. It's gonna reinforce many of these principles we laid out and will make things, I believe, all the more clear. Okay, I know there was a lot covered here, but hopefully it helps. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments section below or any feedback on how I can improve this video if I do it again in the future. I'll post links to everything that we covered in the description section below. As always, stay safe out there.